Okay, hello. Welcome to the webinar regarding reimbursement and regulation of innovative medical devices. This event will begin in 2 minutes. Please check in via the Google link below in the comment section. After you accomplish the checking process, then you can download the presentation file. Okay, so we see you later. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I should say good morning, good evening, or good afternoon because we got the global audience today. Welcome to today's webinar on reimbursement and regulation innovative medical devices. This is Lynn from Anchor Media, and it's my pleasure to be the moderator today. First of all, I would like to express our appreciation to the guided organization, Department of Industrial Technology, Ministry of Economic Affairs in Taiwan. And this event is organized by Science and Technology Law Institute of Institute for Information Industry. Furthermore, we would like to thank for the co-organizer, Medical Device Innovation Center of National Cheng Kung University from Taiwan. Lastly, the media supported by Anchor Care and Sourcing Cares. Today, the seminar gathered more than 100 audience online through YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn of Sourcing Cares. Even we just announced this event 3 weeks ago, so which shows this topic is really attractive and should be useful for the industry. So in regards to the audience breakdown, more than half audience are from manufacturer of medical devices, and the rest of them are from medical facilities and academic organizations throughout the world. We are so glad to with you with us. As innovative medical devices are transforming healthcare, but their market entry depends on clear regulation and reimbursement. So today, 2 leading experts will share their insights on navigating this crucial aspect. This event is expected to bring you the reimbursement system of advanced medical devices of the US market and the latest update about FDA De Novo approvals. So firstly, we will have Mr. Mark Domyahn at Lymon Group from the United States, and he will deliver a precious speech regarding reimbursement trends in advanced medical devices. Mark, welcome to join us today. Please say hello to our audience from Taiwan, Europe, and America.
Hello, everybody, and I'm happy to be here. Can't wait for our discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We are looking forward to your presentation later. So secondly, it's our pleasure to cooperate with Professor Anna Chen from Cheng Kung University in Taiwan. She's also going to share the trend in medical devices innovation, highlights from FDA De Novo approvals. Professor Chen, welcome. You can say hi to our audience.
Hi, Dean. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to the forum.
Okay, thank you both. And we can't wait to listen to your speech. So now, before we begin, I would like to introduce you the distinguished guest with us today. We are honored to have Dr. Yuying Huang join us. Dr. Huang is the section manager of the Science and Law Institute of Institute for Information Industry. Please welcome Dr. Huang for the opening remarks. Thank you. Yeah. Dr. Huang, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, distinguished guests and friends. This is Yuying. I'm from one of the Science and Technology Law Institute of the Institute for Information Industry. We also call III. An honor to welcome you to this special seminar, Reimbursement and Regulatory Trends in Innovative Medical Devices. With the rise of the precision health and the digital medical and the AI technology, the global medtech sector is entering a period of profound transformation and also a new era for cross-field integration and complex regulatory challenges. Hence, legal frameworks, reimbursement mechanisms, and the clinical integration are becoming the pillars of determining whether innovation can truly reach patients. At the Science and the Technology Law Institute, we are deeply determined to fostering legal and policy environment that enable innovation. One of our core missions is to bridge technology with regulation, commercialization, and social acceptance. Today's event is part of this mission, intended to help Taiwan's academic and industry sectors navigate international regulatory practice and the reimbursement system with strategic clarity. On the other hand, we also welcome the global audience from several countries, 5 countries, okay, which means there are many chances to network the international resources. We are honored to invite 2 distinguished speakers, Mr. Mark Domyahn and of the Lymon Group, who will offer deep insight into the reimbursement logic and access strategies in the U.S. system. And Professor Anna Chen from National Tsinghua University will also walk us through the FDA De Novo process and the innovation trends. We believe that understanding the global language of the regulatory and the reimbursement is essential, not only for technology breakthroughs, but also for system success. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this seminar sparks meaningful dialogue and collaboration as sectors. Wishing you a valuable insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Huang, and thank you for your full support to organize this meaningful event. Also, we spare more time for Mark. Yes, so I think all the audience are waiting for his presentation. But before that, let me back to the agenda. Mr. Mark Domyahn, a partner at Lymon Group in the States, is your go-to expert for medical reimbursement and health economics. He has helped tons of companies, no matter it's big or small. Yeah, they figured out how to get paid for their medical innovations. Think getting new treatment covered by Medicare or creating those essential CPT, HCPCS. That's Mark's specialty. So let me hand over the following 40 minutes to Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, and it's nice to be here in front of everybody virtually, and I hope everyone is doing very well. So as described previously, my name is Mark Domyahn. I am a partner with the Lymon Group. I focus on the U.S. market exclusively in medical technology and trying to figure out how reimbursement, coverage, coding, and payment, and we'll touch on all of these elements over the next few minutes, how these work together for medical technology. So I don't spend a lot of time on the agenda. We're really going to focus on the reimbursement side of things and the things that we think about as consultants as we broach the subject of reimbursement with companies and things that we recommend they think about as they bring a product to market. At the end of the day, reimbursement is all about trying to get those that are purchasing your products paid. And that's where we want to focus on. So the FDA is really as critical, as important. You've got to get through the FDA. in order to sell your product. This is the next step in that evolution or that journey. That is, who's going to pay for it? Okay, and that's what we'll touch on here. So real quick, just the JD Lymon Group. We are health economics and reimbursement, market access, call it what you will. We are a consulting firm based in Minnesota in the United States. We focus exclusively on the U.S. market. If you need help because you're in Germany or Japan or any other country around the world, we really recommend talking to somebody who can speak the language, who understands that healthcare system and are kind of feet on the street in that particular country. We happen to focus on the United States. And we really focus exclusively on the complex relationships between published clinical evidence, coding, payer coverage policies, which we'll touch on, ultimately payment, both for the physician who's performing the procedure and the entity that's buying it, the hospital or the office setting, and then other healthcare decision makers. The US system, I'll just tell everybody now, if you're not familiar with it, is very complex. We are not a single payer system like some other countries, and as a result, it's a very lucrative market, but it's a very complicated market from a reimbursement perspective. And that's where we can come in and provide guidance, but it's certainly, whether it be us or somebody else, that companies, we recommend thinking about it very early in the process as you think about coming to the US market. Each partner, well, there are 3 of us in our firm. We're a small boutique consulting practice, but each of us have over 25 years of experience doing exactly this in the reimbursement space. Before I came into consulting, I worked at Medtronic, I worked at Zimmer, I worked at St. Jude Medical before the acquisition of Abbott, and 2 startups. And then started my consulting career in 2016 and joining JD Lymon in 2018. Both my partners have been doing it longer than I have. So we've seen a lot of different technologies and involved with a lot of different companies in bringing products to market through the R&D stage, through commercialization, and ultimately becoming standard of care. One of the key things that we want to talk about is really, we want to start from the beginning. The earlier you start thinking about your reimbursement journey in the US market, the better. And I like to start with the 3 things that I think are pivotal. One is, what do I want to say in the market? That's your marketing function, okay? What do I want to be able to say are my features and my benefits that are truly, what's the clinical benefit I'm trying to solve? What's the problem I'm trying to solve, okay? Marketing is what I want to say to my customers. Regulatory, which Professor Anna will talk about here shortly, is about what am I allowed to say? We are a regulated industry by the Food and Drug Administration, so you have to have clearance, or you have to have De Novo, or you have to have a PMA for most of the technologies that I deal with, at least. And they're going to put some boundaries. What's your indication statement? Those sorts of things. Coupled with the third question here is, who's going to pay for it? And that's where I focus. I focus on the right-hand side here on the reimbursement. So are you selling to hospital customers? Are you selling to physician customers? There's a lot of different entities and stakeholders in the US reimbursement system, in the US healthcare system. And so you want to make sure you're thinking about it ultimately, who you're selling to, and as that factors into price. And then underneath all of these is what you're going to go study. And what published clinical evidence are you going to prove? If you're solving for an unmet clinical need, the first question people will ask is, well, prove it to me. And that's where your published evidence comes through. But these 3 areas, in my opinion at least, drive what clinical studies I need to go do, and not the other way around. So answering these 3 questions early is very important. From a US reimbursement perspective, folks may have heard it called as a 3-legged stool, or there are 3 primary components, and fully agree with that. And so with this Venn diagram, what we're trying to convey is there are 3 primary components for every medical technology or every procedure performed in the US that we really need to focus on. And I'm going to start in the bottom left, and that's coding. And coding is the language of reimbursement, and it's how things flow through our healthcare system that I describe what the procedure is that's being performed, as well as what's the diagnosis of the patient. So I might have heart failure, that's my diagnosis, there's a code for that. And then I have a procedure to treat my heart failure. I get implanted with a medical device that treats my heart failure. There's a procedure for that, there's a code for that. So it starts typically with understanding, do codes exist that describe your technology and the related procedure? Or do you need new codes to be created? There's no right or wrong answer to those questions. You just need to understand that early in the process. You're going to hear that throughout my presentation. The earlier you get these things figured out, the better. Coding then translates to payment. And this is where a lot of people tend to focus, which understandably so, because now we're talking dollars. And how much what is my average sales price that I'm hoping to garner for my technology? And who's going to pay for that? So I'm selling to, I need the physician to prescribe my technology and to believe my technology works. But more often than not, for most implantable devices, at least in this country, they're not paying, a physician is not writing a check to the manufacturer, it's the hospital. Not always, and there's exceptions to every rule, but really understanding who you're asking for payment from is really important. And ultimately who they will be asking payment from, because that ties into the third piece here, which is payer coverage. And coverage is on top because coverage is king. You really need to have payer coverage. And what payer coverage is defines which technologies and procedures that each payer in this country, we're a multi-payer system, Medicare, commercial insurance. We'll get into a little bit of that throughout this talk. What they believe is medically reasonable and necessary. And I can tell you what the FDA, what Professor Anna will talk about, they focus on safety and efficacy of the product and technology. Payers focus on what's medically reasonable and necessary, and that is, there's a gap between that, okay? And so those things need to be, you need to understand, what do I need to get through the FDA? But also, what do I need to convince payers to provide coverage for my technology? I can have great coding, I establish coding, I can have payment, but if I don't have payer coverage, I have a really hard time selling in the US market. So where we're trying to get to, and these are not linear, these are not sequential, you're working in all three of these potentially at the same time, is you really want to be here where I've got adequate codes, I've got appropriate payment, and I've got coverage that I can, that's adequate, that it provides access to my technology for the patients that I'm trying to serve. So again, one of the key things from our perspective as JD Lymon Group, if you're starting to think about a technology and bringing it to the US market, and you're thinking about how do I get through the FDA, these are some of the other questions you should be asking because it relates to reimbursement. What are the key attributes of the technology? What's the unmet need? It always starts there. Tell me what the clinical problem we're trying to solve, and how does the product address it? Are the value propositions of the product clearly defined? Is it clinical? Is it economic? Is it efficiency? Okay, I might be a second generation device that saves time in the OR. That's fine. It's just understand what it is you're offering to the market and for which stakeholders. Is it physicians? Is it hospitals? I often hear with the new technology, oh, we're going to save society all this money. Well, at least in the United States, there is no society that I'm selling to. Society doesn't write a check. Medicare does. Individual payers do, hospitals do, but not society. So it's really understanding and drilling down into which of your stakeholders are benefiting and understanding the flow of money. What's the target patient population and how does this match with your FDA labeling? That can be really important. Your FDA labeling is an important first step to understand what you're going to be targeting. Is the product truly novel, just an iteration, or a Me Too? And there's no wrong answer here. There's nothing wrong with being a Me Too product. Reimbursement tends to follow categories of devices, not specific manufacturers. So there's nothing wrong with being second or third and letting the first come to market do all the heavy lifting with reimbursement. That's a very viable strategy, and worked with a lot of companies that do that. We also tend to focus on what is the overall business strategy objectives of the product? What's your expected price, market share? Are you disrupting an established market? Are you truly novel and you're introducing a whole new treatment paradigm? And how realistic are those objectives? Everyone wants to be the next big Medtronic or the next big Johnson & Johnson. There's nothing wrong with that, but just understanding where you're going to launch is really important. Where's the product and the development timeline? In my experience, the earlier we're having the reimbursement conversations in the product development life cycle, the better. It's never too early to start. And lastly, are your regulatory, your marketing, your reimbursement, and your clinical strategies all aligned? Going back to the slide that I showed earlier, what do I want to say to the market? What can I say in the market? Who's going to pay for it? And what evidence do I need underneath that to support those questions? Things like, am I going to be able to secure breakthrough device designation from the FDA? What is my clinical trial design? Again, what am I going to prove? Am I going after non-inferiority? Am I going after superiority? Somewhere in between? All of these need to be aligned to make sure that everyone's on the same page from a company perspective to make sure that we maximize the opportunities that we can. In the United States healthcare system, we are not a single payer system, as I previously mentioned, and there are multiple stakeholders. This is just to give an example, and it's by no means an exhaustive list, but CPT coding is usually a very important component for most technologies. That's administered by the American Medical Association, or AMA. This is a private entity. This is not Medicare. This is not private payers. They are the stewards of CPT coding, and these are made up of the specialty societies. So if you're in cardiology, there's the American College of Cardiology. There's the Society of Cardiovascular Angiography and Imaging. There are professional societies that make up the American Medical Association. So this isn't even one entity. There are, probably over 100 specialty societies for dermatology, for gastroenterology, for neurology, neurosurgery, and on and on and on, that within CPT and clinical guidelines, which are very important as you think about payer coverage. You want to be in the guidelines and what published evidence. So you need to think about this. At the same time, I need to think about coverage. And again, if coverage is king, I want to understand commercial payers. As a group, they are the largest entity in the United States. So these are groups like United Healthcare, Cigna, Aetna, and they have various other, Blue Cross Blue Shield, if you've heard of those. Again, each of these make their own coverage decisions and make assessments of technology based on your FDA labeling and your published clinical evidence. And is it sufficient that says we're medically reasonable and necessary and we want to pay for it? As a general rule, in my opinion, payers are built to say no. It takes time. They want to see more evidence. If you give them 6 months with a primary endpoint at 6 months, they want a year. You give them a year, they want 2 years. You give them 2 years, they want 5 years. And if you get 5 years, they say, well, where's a confirmatory study? You should be in the guidelines. So there are hundreds of commercial payers in the United States. So we put them in one big bucket, but this, again, multiple stakeholders. They also defer to health technology assessment groups. So groups like HECRI, AIS. This is if from a OUS perspective in England and the United Kingdom, there's NICE. NICE does a very nice job of doing health technology assessments. That factors in to what other payers in the United States are going to think about coverage. And then finally, we turn to Medicare, or the acronym for Medicare is CMS. It's the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Why there's not an extra M here, I don't know. But CMS and Medicare, I will probably say those, they're meant to be interchangeable when I talk about them in this presentation. They focus on everything. So they provide coverage as a payer. They can develop their codes outside of CPT coding, and then they administer payment. They help determine the payment levels by which they're the benchmark for every other payer in the country. Everyone understands what Medicare pays and they can adjust from there. So this becomes very important. And then finally, don't want to forget our providers, who also deal with the codes they have to bill to payers, the coverage, as well as then finally the payment. Okay, so just understanding, and we're trying to keep it simple here, but there are a lot of moving parts within the US healthcare system. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but understanding there are multiple, just like there are multiple languages globally, there are multiple coding systems in the United States. The three that are the most important typically for technologies, the CPT, and CPT describes what physicians do. All physicians use CPT codes, and all physicians typically use our technologies. So understanding this CPT system is very important. ICD-10-CM, these are diagnosis codes. For the most part, technologies don't need to have codes for new diseases because there's not, there may be some times and places, but for the most part, what's wrong with me? Heart failure, I've got diabetes, those codes exist. But CPT describes procedures, not technology. ICD-10 PCS codes also describe procedures. It's a different language than CPT. It's a different coding system, and it's used by different parties. This is a hospital inpatient coding set. CPT is used by hospital outpatient services, physicians, in ambulatory surgery centers, or ASCs. You'll also notice that the owner is different. And then finally, we've got HCPCS level 2 codes. These are different types of codes. These are alphanumeric, and they basically describe hospital outpatient procedures and supplies that aren't described appropriately by CPT, or that can't be described over here. So these are things like if you have an external device that's wearable on the patient, that's not really a procedure that needs to be described by the physician typically with CPT codes. So Medicare can create codes for durable medical equipment, which we'll touch on here in a couple of slides. Drugs. Reimbursement for drugs is different than it is for devices. They have different codes. So Medicare and it can create other codes that aren't CPT related as you administer a drug, for cancer or for whatever, for chemotherapy or for whatever treatment you're giving. And various entities use these codes as well. So the point of this slide is, as you think about your technology, it's, am I going to be mostly hospital inpatient? In which case I care more about these codes. Am I going to be used in these different settings? I always care about CPT as long as a physician is involved in delivering my technology. And sometimes I might need a code over here. So understanding where you fit on this spectrum helps outline what are the milestones, what's the timelines in which, if I need new codes, am I described by existing codes? Again, as we think about the coding, payment, and coverage Venn diagram I showed earlier, we usually start with the coding because this tells me where I kind of, do I have a code that describes me, or do I have to go get new coding? Provider payment, so then we moved over to the next bubble. Payment is typically associated with the resources for the procedure performed and not necessarily on the value the procedure brings. So for example, if I have a new technology that's going to replace an existing technology and then replace 2 or 3 future procedures. Well, I don't necessarily get to just take my cost and multiply it by 4 because I'm the primary procedure plus I replaced 4 others. It doesn't really work that way in our system. You get basically, you need to think about your price very carefully, but reimbursement is focused on the single event, not the avoidance of future events, for example. So payment is usually focused on what are the cost of the device, the cost of the procedure, that are non-device related, that's going to help determine what your payment level will be. Payment methodologies or reimbursement methodologies will differ, and they are very different depending on where you're having that procedure done. In this country, we talk about outpatient procedures versus inpatient procedures in the hospital as an example. Well, outpatient is you can stay 1 night. So I'm admitted to the hospital on Monday. I have the procedure performed. I stay 1 midnight. I go to Tuesday and I'm discharged. That is not a hospital inpatient stay. That's a hospital outpatient stay. That has a different payment methodology than I'm in the hospital I go in on a Monday and I go home the following Monday. That means I've been in the hospital for 7 midnights. That is considered a hospital inpatient stay. Those are typically more intensive procedures, and the patient requires more care. And that's why they have a different payment methodology. Ambulatory surgery centers, office-based procedures, and then differences can also exist based on the technology category. As I've already indicated, drugs are paid differently than devices, which is paid differently than external wearables or durable medical equipment. And so all of these things need to be factored ideally as you're developing your product. Am I going to be an implantable device, or am I going to be an external wearable device? Because the payment levels and the reimbursement methodologies for those 2 things, even if they're trying to perform the same function, can be very different. Okay. And for devices, often is the procedure that is being performed that will determine the payment levels, because the procedure factors in the cost of the device. So that needs to be considered. And then each payer, starting with Medicare, but each private payer will pay different amounts. Okay, Medicare tells you in advance, we're going to pay you so much for this pacemaker implant, or we're going to pay you so much for this placement of a coronary stent. But private payers negotiate. They negotiate with physicians and they negotiate with hospitals. So we can literally have 2 hospitals across the street from each other doing the exact same procedure to the exact type of patient. They will get paid very different rates. So everyone uses Medicare payment levels or CMS payment levels as a benchmark, but need to understand that private payers can negotiate differently. One of the key concepts as well is with each medical service in this country, there are 2 payments that need to be made. And one is the professional, and this is the amount paid to the physician to perform the procedure. Okay, their time and effort to actually implant the pacemaker or implant the coronary stent. The facility is the amount paid to where the procedure is performed. Okay, and this is where the payment methodologies can be different, because those are meant to cover the entire cost of the procedure, the device, the overhead, the operating room, the recovery room, intensive care unit, depending on where you are, all of those things. And usually it's into one number, into one payment level. So each of these, both of the components, the physician component and the facility component, are billed for every service in the country. Okay, for every procedure I perform, I'm going to have two bills, one from the physician, one from the hospital. Okay, and each different place of service wherever I'm performing that procedure can have a different payment methodology, which I talked about. So a physician can perform procedures in their own clinic, their freestanding clinic, in which case they get both the physician component, the labor of doing the procedure, as well as the overhead to deliver that. They can also perform a procedure in a hospital. That's very common. Well, if they're inpatient, they're paid under a DRG system. If they're outpatient, they're paid under ambulatory payment classification, or APCs. And I should have said at the beginning, I have an acronym list at the end of this. So I know there's a lot of acronyms in the US healthcare system. I do a glossary in the back that I believe everyone's getting the slides. So you have those as well on what these mean. But again, these represent typically single payments that the hospital receives for that entire hospital admission, whether it be outpatient or inpatient. And then finally, we have a small subset of procedures that can be done in an ambulatory surgery center. Think of these as a freestanding surgery clinic. They have their own payment system. So this can be done by, there's ophthalmology, for example, is a heavy specialty that does a lot of services in the ambulatory surgery center. Urology is another one. So if you're in those therapeutic spaces, this site of service might become more relevant than, say, the hospital inpatient setting, or in some cases, the office is more relevant. So it's really important to understand where your technology will be utilized to understand what the payment can look like. I am not going to go through this slide in detail. I know it's a little bit of an eye chart, but I did want to include it because depending on where I'm going, this gives a sense of the primary billing mechanism, the payment methodology, how it's typically paid. So for example, in the physician office, think of these as I go to my doctor's office and they can do a minor procedure right there. They're billed with CPT codes, they're paid under a fee schedule, and they pay for each distinct procedure. That's different than the hospital or the ASC or the hospital setting, inpatient or outpatient, because you typically get a single payment. If I'm in the hospital 4 days, or I'm in the hospital 8 days, one payment. Okay. I can have multiple procedures done to me. I go home the next day. On the outpatient side, it's still going to be one payment. So again, those are sorts of things you need to think about earlier. And then there's external devices. This is a whole different ballgame, a whole different set of rules, so to speak, compared to the physician office, hospital, inpatient, outpatient, or the ambulatory surgery center. So again, you need to make sure you understand what those trade-offs are if I'm going wearable and external, which is this pathway, versus I'm going to be implanted or inserted into the patient to treat whatever the condition they have. Those things become very important. So one of the other things that is really important, particularly, is most technologies are able to be used in a hospital setting. Okay, Medicare or CMS is a prospective payment system, and so they tell you in advance. I will know here in a couple of months what hospitals will get paid for calendar year 2026. Okay, Medicare tells you all of that in advance. So if I launch a new technology in 2026, the payment systems are fixed. So what Medicare has done, and a few folks on the call may have heard of these two programs, they understand that the payment rates today don't reflect the cost of new technology. And so they establish programs on the hospital inpatient side. It's referred to the new technology add-on payment, or NTAP, because everything has to have an acronym. On the hospital outpatient and the ASC side, it's called transitional pass-through payment status, also referred to as TPT. And I'm not going to go through each of these, but they have certain criteria. Not every technology qualifies, but this program was set up, these two programs here, the NTAP on the hospital inpatient side, the TPT on the hospital outpatient side, have been around for a long time. These are 20-year-old, 25-year-old programs. And what they're meant to do is for select new technologies, Medicare will pay incremental money. They'll pay what they would normally pay, and then they can give you a little bit more. And these programs over time have proven very valuable for new technologies that they launch into the US market. because typically new technology costs more than the old technology that they're replacing. Well, if the payment level is the same, whether I use the old or the new, the hospital is going to push back because they're the ones writing, the check to you as the manufacturer for your new novel device. These two mechanisms afford to say, you can use the old device and get paid what you normally would get paid, or you can get paid more potentially when you use my new technology because I qualified for one or both of these programs. Okay. We don't have time to go through this in excruciating detail, but here's some of the requirements and what it means. Now, the next slide, what I'm going to say, and this is where tying into your regulatory strategy and some of the things Professor Anna is going to talk about is so important. Because if I'm able to secure from the FDA, okay, the Food and Drug Administration, a separate entity from Medicare, these are the criteria I need to meet. And these can be very hard, particularly this one, where I have to provide a substantial clinical improvement over current therapies. Think randomized controlled study, okay, proving superiority. That's, generally speaking, that's kind of what you need to look at. Well, if I'm able to secure breakthrough device designation from the FDA, suddenly the things that are in orange are automatically, you meet those criteria. So if I'm able to secure a breakthrough device designation for my technology before I get FDA clearance or approval, okay, you get breakthrough first, then you get the approval from the FDA when we've satisfied their requirements. NTAP is all but guaranteed. This criteria is automatically met. This criteria is automatically met. This one is relatively easy. It's not quite the same on transitional pass-through, but the hardest of the criteria, prove to me you're a substantial clinical improvement, is you don't have to prove anything else. You're automatically deemed to have qualified. So understanding and tying your reimbursement strategy with your regulatory strategy early. Can we get breakthrough device designation from the FDA? And if so, for what indication? Because it can make getting these two payment mechanisms, which help me launch into the US market. If I'm selling to hospitals, this can have a major impact in terms of market adoption. I did want to touch on external devices. External wearable devices are commonly referred to as durable medical equipment, or DME. Again, everything has to have an acronym. The coding and payment processes for DME are very different compared to implantable devices. And so that needs to be considered, particularly if you've got a product that can be developed either way. We might be able to do external, we might be able to do fully implantable, or there are instances where I have a combination of both. I implant something, but I have an external power source. Neurostimulation is very common, where I implant something into the human body, and then I place the power source outside for 30 minutes a day. I need to power up to stimulate for whatever reason. Okay, they're not combination devices because they're not including drugs and devices, but they are a combination of external and external components. That needs to be factored in. Durable medical equipment is typically provided. There's a different intermediary. It's not necessarily the hospital. They're DME suppliers that work directly with patients to make sure that they understand how to use the durable medical equipment they're getting. So that needs to be factored in. And there is typically more pricing flexibility for implantable devices compared to the external devices or durable medical equipment. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It is what it is. But in general, if just thinking about price, it's easier to garner a higher price for something that is implanted into the patient versus something that the patient wears. And that, again, important consideration. There's neither right nor wrong, but you just want to know that early in the development process in case it might change your form factor. Okay, and that's what the last bullet point here is just trying to convey, is that just so you know what you're walking into if you're doing an external device or you're doing an implanted device. What could those opportunities look like? And so we've talked a little bit about coding. We've talked a little bit about payment. One of the other things we want to talk about is the relationship between payer coverage. Again, that's at the top of the Venn diagram I showed earlier. And you really have to have coverage. Again, I can have established coding, I can have a great payment rate, but if a payer doesn't believe I work and they say non-coverage, that you're really cut out from the market. And so what this diagram is just trying to show is minimal clinical data tends to lead to negative coverage from payers. And that's a tough spot to be, because the only way to get out of it is to move up this scale. So the more published credible published clinical evidence you have. That's what's going to change this. So again, you might do especially if you're going to get into clinical guidelines, that factors into your clinical data. So the more you can get to this box, the more likely it is to be positive coverage. And this really is more of the most subjective of the three coding, coverage, and payment. This is the most subjective because each payer makes their own determination. So, and no one will tell you in advance, if you do this study, I'll give you positive coverage. They'll never do that. So you're triangulating based on engagement with KOLs, engagement on your clinical trial design. What's the clinical evidence? Are you a new treatment paradigm? Are you a Me Too product? All of these things factor into how much clinical evidence am I going to need, not only for the FDA, but for marketing to say what they want to say, and ultimately for payers to pay for this. Going back to one of my earlier slides. One of the other things that's important to think about, as I just keep adding to the list from a reimbursement perspective, is who is the payers that you're most interested in. Again, we are not a single payer system here in the US. Medicare is the benchmark from which everybody looks at, but Medicare is primarily 65 and older and disabled, or patients that have kidney dialysis. Eventually, if you're disabled, if I were blind, for example, I would eventually be on Medicare. Or I was on kidney dialysis, I would eventually be to Medicare. It's a very important payer in this country, but it's not the only one. And so if I'm dealing with a pediatric patient population, or I'm dealing with women's health for postpartum depression, that is not a Medicare patient population. Those are different groups of payers. Medicaid is administered by the states. It's funded by the federal and state, each individual state in the United States. This tends to be for low-income adults, children, and pregnant women. It's supposed to be more of a safety net. Most medical device companies are not going to focus on the Medicaid market because typically it's a very low-paying market. Okay. And then we also have private payers. And this is if, I was employed by a company, I would go to my company would allow, I could get insurance through my company. They would work with commercial insurers or private payers to administer that. So typically with most medical device companies, I'm focusing here on Medicare because they help set the benchmark. And I will focus here because this is the largest group of overall number of patients in the country is going to be here in the private payer. And that's, so we commonly refer to that as the payer mix. What is the payer mix of your technology? If I'm dealing with heart failure, I'm predominantly dealing with a disease of age. Well, that's going to be 65 and older. My payer mix is going to be predominantly Medicare. Okay. Versus I'm dealing with, can't think of something, but that affects hypertension, which affects younger patients. Okay. This might be more private payer skewed. So understanding your specific payer mix for your therapeutic area is going to be very important. So as I get close to the end of my presentation, I did want to touch on a couple of trends, at least to give some parting thoughts here a little bit. US reimbursement, for as much talk as it's been about value-based care and those sorts of things, the US reimbursement system has historically been based on fee-for-service. If a procedure is performed, regardless of outcomes, you get paid a set amount. That is still fundamentally true, in my opinion. It is a big ecosystem, the US healthcare market, and to change incentives and to change outcomes in terms of paying based on outcomes, that's going to take a lot of time. And so there are measures and there are some things that Medicare and other private payers do that are all good, but fundamentally what we are is a fee-for-service system. If you perform this procedure, you will get paid X. Okay. Transitional coverage for emerging technologies, or TCET. This is a program that has gotten a lot of press lately. It's a program for Medicare patients to provide an avenue for coverage. Again, so starting with that top bubble in the Venn diagram, and it's a select number of technologies that have to have breakthrough device designation or BDD. So again, needing to understand what those trade-offs would be, you want to think about that early. Software as a service and artificial intelligence, probably the single biggest area over the last 3 years that I've seen new technology come in. And the reason for that is because Medicare or CMS has started to pay for software as a service as a medical device, if you're regulated 510K clearance or whatever as a medical device, Medicare is starting to pay for that. Payers are starting to pay for these algorithms that take, an ECG data or a prior MRI and say, oh, we're noticing you're we might have a diagnosis here we would have not otherwise seen. Medicare is recognizing that. Payers are recognizing that. There's codes for some of those services now. And so that's been a big area, and reimbursement tends to lag with the technology. So there's a lot of really fascinating, very interesting software as a service technologies that are still having struggle getting reimbursed, but it's coming. It's just going to take some time. External devices and durable medical equipment continue to be reimbursement differently. So again, the external technology has grown leaps and bounds over the last several years. We've seen some fascinating technologies there, but the payment systems haven't caught up and they're still very antiquated. So it's really important to understand those considerations. And then clearly with the US, every time there's an administration change, I don't try to go political at all, but every time we shift administrations, the focus of the emphasis of the things that the current administration wants to focus on changes. So that has implications that ripple through the healthcare system, just along with everything else in this country. So you just need to understand and kind of keep your eye on if this administration has a different area of focus than the prior administration, that can change the direction of how some of these programs go as well. So some best practices, I'll leave you with a couple of additional thoughts over the next couple of slides. Again, I don't think I could say this enough. Factor in reimbursement early and often. It's a journey and not a destination. I've worked with a lot of successful companies that have gotten exits or have launched and become big companies. Reimbursement is never, well, once I'm there, I'm good. I never have to do anything again. It's important to establish what success looks like from a reimbursement perspective. And what's the roadmap to get there? What is it going to take? Sometimes the road is hard. I'd rather know that early versus late in the process. We often get the question, well, I just need to know if I have a code for my technology. And there is so much more to it than that. What's the payment rates? What's the coverage look like? Can I change the payment rates? Is there an opportunity for a different code? They all tie together. So it's important to think about the coverage, coding, and payment Venn diagram to see where you are. Also, the roadmap is only as good as your assumptions are today. And often we talk to companies that are saying, well, I'm going to get FDA approval in 5 years after my PMA trial or my IDE trial or whatever it is. Well, things can change. So it's great to have a roadmap today, but obviously periodically you want to change that if your assumptions change. Can I get through the FDA faster or slower? Do I have to do a clinical study? Do I want to do a clinical study? Those things factor into what the implications will be for reimbursement. I've already mentioned this, but payers are built to say no. That's what they are. They want to control utilization, and they'll tell you they want to make sure that they get the right patient, the right care at the right time. And I think that's what they're trying to do. But with new technology, it's hard to have 5-year outcomes if I just launched a year ago, right? I can only have been studying this for so long. So there's the yin and the yang of what payers want to see, and they always want to see more, versus what I'm able to deliver today. Okay. And realize that payers are never going to tell you exactly what they need. The FDA will help you they'll help define what you need to get FDA clearance. Payers will never tell you, if you do this study, I will cover you. They don't give you that much of specificity. So you're going to have to figure it out as you go along, working with your physician advisors and understanding the market space and what technologies are tangential or related to you to make sure. Payers are skeptical of anything we say as manufacturers. So health economic models, in my experience in this country, don't do a lot of good. So I'd rather have you focus on clinical data than health economic data. And the clinical evidence is key. That's really the biggest thing. The last slide I have here is be realistic, appropriate, and I have it in quotes deliberately. Reimbursement typically lags FDA approval or clearance. The focus is to minimize that lag. And that's where thinking about it early can happen. You aren't worth more. I want to get paid more than my competitor, but I'm only going to show I'm, clinically inferior, not inferior to. It's hard to get paid more for that. Try to be as objective as you can. Honestly, how good is your product? How good is your evidence? How good, how is that related to your price? Get as much feedback as you can early. And please, please, please don't get caught in the trap that a lot of companies do is they fall in love with their product. That's the be objective. Take a step back. What are your physicians really telling you? Not just your friendly physicians, but your non-friendly physicians. and help just get that feedback so you understand the obstacles that may be in your way when it comes time for market adoption. I think with that, my contact information is available. I know I went through that relatively quickly. There's a lot more detail behind all of this, of course, and my contact information. If at any point you have a question, feel free to send me an email after this session. I'll do my best to respond. Thank you.
Okay. Wow, time flies. Thank you, Mark. We cannot learn enough from your presentation. Thank you so much, Mark. Okay, as we did learn a lot from your sharing, so my dear friends, all the audience online, if there's any question raised by you, please leave your message in comment section. We will have a Q&A session later. Meanwhile, may I remind you again, please check in the Google link via the comment section. After you accomplish the checking process, then you could download Mark's slide successfully. Okay, so thanks again, Mark. Yeah, and so next, we will have Professor Anna Chen from National Cheng Kung University. She is a leader in medical device innovation, and she is also passionate about translating research into real-world impact. As a Stanford Biodesign Global Faculty Fellow, she's brought need-driven innovation to Taiwan and shaping the next generation of medtech innovators. Join her to explore the latest trends revealed by FDA De Novo approvals. Professor Chen, here you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Can you see my slides well?
Please have the full screen.
Okay.
Yes, I think the full screen it will be
Is
more
it full
convenient.
screen now?
It did not yet, but I think the full screen will be more convenient for our audience to understand and to learn from your presentation. Okay, you can restart it. Yeah, take your time.
Okay, is it working now?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. It's a good. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to be here and to share some of our studies recently to you. And it's really honored to give presentations together with Mark. Mark had mentioned about reimbursement, but now I'm trying to share with you about the trends in medical device innovation and also echo what Mark just sharing with us. I'm Professor Chen and NCKU and also NCKU Medical Device Innovation Center. I'm also the global faculty of Stanford Biodesign and responsible for the biomedical device innovation and commercialization in NCKU. Just echo what Mark just mentioned, you know, there are two death valleys of medical device commercialization. So the first death valley is for regulatory approval. You are not get approval, you cannot sell your product, your device. And then it's reimbursement. If you didn't get reimbursement, it's very difficult, very challenging for you to get implemented into your target market. And so, and I used to ask the audience, like, where do you want to die? You know, you want to die in the first 80 or the second 80? But Mark just tell us the answer. You know, right? Because we always say, if you want to die, you have to die early, right? So you have to think, implement reimbursement thinkings right from the beginnings to ensure that you won't die even you get approved or cleared. Okay, so also echo what Mark just mentioned about the new trend in the software as medical device and breakthrough. I also collect some insights as highlights for FDA De Novo approvals. Okay, so let's talk about trends in medical device innovation. We know the market size is booming. And so in terms of revenue, the market is valued at $678.88 billion in 2025. And it's keep rising all the time. And North American region has dominated the market with 40% of the total revenue share in 2024. And we can say by end users, hospitals and clinic segment has accounted largest revenue share in 2024. So from here, we can see most of it is still prescriptional usage and use it by hospitals and clinics. And also the diagnostic sector segment is growing at the highest CAGR from 2025 to 2034. This is also, we will talk a little bit about this from our highlights innovation cases. Okay, as we say, North America accounts for 40%, and US is the global leaders in medical device production and drive the whole market. And we see there is a lot of advanced and innovative medical device get cleared or approved every day. But it's also like what the reimbursement cost is also rising all the time. So adoption of the advanced technology, you know, it can actually cure the disease, decrease the mortality. However, the cost is rising. Okay. And also we know about the rising chronic disease, the prevalence, and also healthcare spending are major market growth drivers. And also Asia Pacific, the chronic disease and also home monitoring device, we call about home care, is also in demand. We will briefly go through that too. And also India and China, the greater health awareness and the rising per capita income, and also aging population and government investments are also pushing the booming of the medical device market. So we conclude the top growth drivers includes technology innovation, like Mark just mentioned about the AI, machine learning, IoTs into medical devices is transforming the diagnostic and also treatments. And then aging populations, global aging is accelerating. So age-related conditions also create a huge market. Rising healthcare expenditures. Government and private sectors are investing heavily in healthcare infrastructures and also enabling other market opportunities. And the chronic disease management. The rising cases diabetics, like we know, lots of our friends have this kind of issues, heart disease, and etc. So it concludes the trends in medical device innovation. Today's talk, we were focusing on two sectors, the digital therapeutic as software as a medical device centric, and also home health care. The DTX, you know, it defined as evidence-based therapeutic interventions. So we learn about evidence-based, so you need evidence to prove it. So the effectiveness is required. So clinical efficacy is important and driven by high quality software programs. So it's driven by software, mainly by software, and designed to prevent, manage, or treat a medical disorder or disease. So digital therapeutic strengthen the patient engagement. So it's software, evidence-based, and focus on patient engagement. And for their therapeutic pathway under guidance of a healthcare professional. So which means they are medical device and also prescription. Most of the digital therapeutic get cleared by FDA. Prescriptional usage mainly. And the main difference between DTX applications and the other digital health applications, DTX is categorized by its software-driven therapy. So we can see here, we talk about a lot about digital health, but the digital therapeutic is clinical efficacy and government regulation. So which means you have to get FDA cleared before you can enter the market. And so it's a medical device, but it's a health software-driven medical device. And as we can see, digital therapeutic market size is rising too. Surprisingly, in the EU market, it's more dominating than the rest of the world. They have special reimbursement pathway for that. And however, yeah, but US market is currently is also leading the market share, and but they are following the traditional pathway. However, there are some eco marks talk. They have some special destinations. I will highlight a few for you as a reference. Then we talk about home health and the consumer devices, the regulations. FDA has recognized home health and consumer devices as a distinct category of medical devices. So on their websites, you can see they have special sectors to introduce this part. And what is home health and consumer devices? It's a medical devices intended for users in any environment outside of professional healthcare facilities. So it includes intended for use in both homes and professional healthcare facility. So use it in the healthcare facilities, use it at home. It's also a home health consumer device. Yeah, but they emphasize on users use it themselves in the same ways as the other medical devices. And I have highlighted a few for you later on too. And also focus on people can use the device safely and effectively. And they have a committee, home health care committees. They will review home use device. Okay, and also FDA has launched the medical device home use initiative. You can find it online. This initiative, they mention a lot of safety issues for the medical device used at home. And there are challenges associated with using medical devices in home. You know, unlike the clinical settings, home is an uncontrolled environment with additional hazard. And so advanced medical devices and the equipment, you know, they are originally designed for use by trained medical professionals in hospitals. And now they are migrating into homes, so the environment is uncontrolled. So there are some unique challenges for home use medical devices, like caregiver knowledge, device usabilities, also includes environmental unpredictability and also cybersecurity. And here are some guidance and the initiative for your reference. As we can see, the top 10 health technology hazard 2024 usability challenges with medical device in the home is the top rank in the first place. So it's truly a crucial issue for home care use. So we talk about a few highlights from FDA De Novo approvals. You know, here we listed because most of the software distributed and home use are focusing on neurology panel. So we conducted the De Novo devices from neurology panels, regulation number 882. And so we connect stuff from 2022 to 2025. And for those in yellow block, they has received breakthrough device destination. That is what Matt mentioned. You receive the breakthrough device destinations, not only ensure if you get cleared by FDA, then we'll introduce it a bit. They will factor your reimbursement pathway. Okay, in 2022, there are two De Novo devices, the brain temp neural net systems. The indication is indicated for measurements of neural net's brain temperature. So it's a first of its kind non-invasive device designed to monitor brain temperature in neural nets. And so because it's first in class, so it's De Novo devices. But in the same year, the second one, Core FM, this is indicated for for TENS devices, indicated as an aid for reducing the symptoms of fibromyalgia in adults with high pain sensitivity. So it's not only first of its kind TENS device to reduce fibromyalgia, symptoms in adults with high pain sensitivity. It also earns the breakthrough designations. Is recognized as a novel non-drug therapy, and also we see meaningful clinical benefits in underserved patient population, and so it's meaningful clinical benefits. As we can see, this is the device Quell FM. You can use it at home. It's home use. Its daily use is recommended, and it can be continued during sleep. And it's capable with the current medications at the prescriptional use. And as we can see, like Mark just mentioned, they have breakthrough determinations, and also see they have provide clinical benefits and the clinical evidence to support their designations. And 2022, there are also two De Novo devices. The first one is NTX100 Domyahn systems. It's a novel mechanism and strong clinical trial support, and they are intended to reduce the symptom of primary to moderate severe restless legs syndromes. We call it RLS, to improve the sleep quality. And both of the device 2023, they have reached the breakthrough determinations because they offer a new effective non-pharma therapies for serious underserved conditions. Another is Sentis. We will introduce it later. So it's also a new indication, first in class, and it's also focusing on in fibromyalgia effects, and affects millions with limited access to non-drug therapies. As we can see, the first one, NTX100s, so after in-clinic Bluetooth collaborations, patient use at home. So you go to the clinic, you under the prescriptional guidance, and then you can use it at home, also home use. And they also provide very strong clinical benefits to support the breakthrough determinations. Also, as Mark just mentioned, the reimbursement pathway will be much more smoothly. The second one is Centra. It's also prescriptional home use digital therapeutic device. They also provide strong clinical benefits as evidence. And then 2024, there are three De Novo devices. The first one, Brain C, is a breakthrough determinations. It's also first in class. It's a novel non-invasive AI tools to guide a clear Alzheimer risk assessment and reduce diagnostic burdens for millions with MCI. This is very important. And there are another two for your reference. And so, in 2025, there is one breakthrough devices. We call it CT132. It's first of its kind prescription. Is also a digital therapeutic devices approved for the prevention treatment for episodic migraines. And also, why they get breakthrough determination is heavily impact daily life and the next non-drug digital options. And so that's why CT132 is also home use. It's a prescriptional usage. It's a digital therapeutic for migraine preventions, and which also provides remote physician monitoring and care adjustments with very strong clinical benefits too. And so, as we can see, those 4 out of 10 devices has received breakthrough device designations, and all of them are home use related devices. So the key takeaways, the rest of non-pharma, non-invasive therapeutics, cutting-edge devices from wearable to digital therapeutic are shifting clinical care away from drugs to non-invasive or software-based treatments. These technologies, they are novel. Some of them, most of them, they don't have existing codings for reimbursement, but they are fighting for the breakthrough determinations and to earn their market opportunities. So this is a crucial trend for everyone's reference. So these technologies are increasing targeting chronic conditions where traditional pharmaceuticals have limitations. And also we can see AI digital health tools enter the FDA mainstreams. Breakthrough designation and de novo clearance for software-driven diagnostic and digital surety highlights the regulatory embrace of digital innovation. The FDA's willingness to establish new device categories, that they would act to establish new protocols, which also reflects the confidence in validating algorithm and software-driven care pathways. And also, as we mentioned before, regulatory innovation accelerates market access. The combination of breakthrough device designations and de novo approval is providing effective for emerging technology. You know, normally it's innovation is emerging technology. Like when I was taking the global faculty training in Stanford Biodesign, they are encouraging us to have medical device innovation. So when I was in NCKU, we are so emphasizing technology innovation. I'm teaching biodesign here too. However, innovative medical device always not only suffer from regulatory pathway, but also suffer from reimbursement challenges. However, we can see some new clues and good news from the recent approved innovative devices. So breakthrough status can offer accelerated review and specialized FDA feedbacks and a smoother path to medical reimbursements, including those NTAP, TPT that Mark just mentioned. And also TSET, you know, if you are interested, you can consult with Mark. And de novo clearance creates a regulatory first mover advantage, solidified new device categories, and also, you know, they will increase the adoptions by payers, providers, and the most crucial part is they will also attract the attention and the awareness of our investors to also accelerate our commercialization process. So as we can see, when the time goes, the cost rise along the times, and it's very highly complicated ecosystems for medical device innovation and commercializations. It's not only like patients or physicians, users, or regulatory bodies. It's very complicated. Lots of stakeholders get involved in. 2 death values. So, as Mark mentioned, regulators, they emphasizing safety and effectiveness, and payers, they care about reasonable and necessary. So early engage in the reimbursement and also regulatory issues in your commercialization process will also help you to overcome the threat from 2 death values. That's the talk today, and thanks for the opportunity to share with you. Let me know if you have any queries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your sharing, Professor Chen. It's the latest update from the FDA regulation, and I do believe all the audience quickly grabbed the point from your presentation today. So dear friends, if you want to have the slides from these 2 speakers, please check in via the Google link shown in the comment section. After you accomplish the checking process, then you could download the file. Again, we are very grateful to have Mark and Professor Chen for their excellent speeches. Okay, both speakers already finished their speeches today. Now we leave some time to these experts. Thank you again, Professor Chen and Mark. Your speech is really informative and inspiring. There are still some questions from our audience today. Now I just skip the expert discussion for replying to more questions from the speakers. Please pay close attention, and we are going to have a Q&A session afterwards. Now my colleague had collect the questions for the speakers, and wow, so bunches of questions coming to us, and we'll do our best to address as many as possible with our speakers. So the first question is for Mark. Yes, on your presentation, page 6, the importance of early alignment is emphasized. Taiwan is a company often focus on functional design and regulatory compliance, while consideration related to reimbursement and business model are usually addressed much later in the process. So how can we avoid falling into the second valley of death where the product gains mark and authorization but fails to secure reimbursement?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I certainly appreciate it. I think the single biggest thing I'd say is while you're focusing on the regulatory pathway, you should concurrently be thinking about your reimbursement pathway. And so to ignore, we'll deal with it later. We'll get FDA clearance, we'll get to market, and then we'll worry about reimbursement. You put yourself, you've delayed things. You should be thinking about that sooner and getting the guidance just as you get on your regulatory pathway from, as you think with whoever you're working with on regulatory, you should be doing this. It sounds a little self-serving as a reimbursement consultant, but it's true. You need that same guidance because what you're looking at is how do I sell my product? Okay. And that's not just the FDA. That's all about payers and reimbursement as well. And they both are critical. It's not one's more important than the other. But FDA will tell you what you need to do to get through. You've got a predicate, you've got a De Novo, you've got your PMA. Payers won't. So it's just as soon as you start thinking about what your regulatory strategy is going to be, do I have a predicate? Should I buy 510K or 510K De Novo? I would strongly recommend you start understanding and thinking about, well, how would it be coded? What's my payment levels that factor into my average sales price? And then will I get this covered by payers in the United States? So the way, again, it feels a little simplistic to say, but the sooner you can start thinking about those things and how you address them, the better off you'll be to avoid the second valley or to minimize the second valley of death. Again, reimbursement tends to lag regulatory, but what I want to do is take that second valley and go from here to here. That's where I do my best to try to control that.
Okay. So thank you for your answer. We don't want to, dead in once or in the second valley. Okay. So next question is for Professor Chen. Okay. Most FDA De Novo approvals in the United States target rare disease or niche conditions such as RLS. Given Taiwan's a relatively small market and control pricing, if companies focus on their innovation on specific patient group, how can they balance international market entry with local reimbursement negotiation strategies? Please.
Thank you, Lin, and thank you for asking. I used to say Taiwan is such a small market, so when we are trying to innovate it, we have to target the global market, and so that's why we have Mark today. We want to know about the global trends, and so first of all, that's focusing on the global market, and second is the De Novo devices is not only focusing on those underserved populations. As long as it's new indications, the first in class, it will be categorized as a De Novo devices. Of course, if it's like low to moderate risk level. And so, but recently, as we can see, Taiwan, as we know, are very strong innovators in software and semiconductors related sectors. And these parts are applied in the conditional indications. So most of them would be categorized as De Novo devices with the new categories. And we have been few cases that we've been fighting and negotiating with US FDA. And we were trying to, but we also see a lot of cases. It's not, if you communicate well and convince them, some of them, you could be as 510K devices with relatively new and compromised indications. However, when you are thinking about this part, as we mentioned before, even we can get past the first test value, but we still have to face the second values. So my suggestions would be you have to align with the reimbursement design and consult with Mark and for your device, while you are innovating your devices, then you can ensure your potential market size and the market accessibility. Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like we got a lot of challenges ahead for entering to the United States market. So next question goes to Mark. Okay, on your presentation, page 14, it explains that the DME and implantable devices differ significantly in terms of payment process, pricing, flexibility, and supply methods. Taiwanese company typically focus on hospital adoption as their core strategy, but the DME model requires direct interaction between supplier and patients. So how should they adjust their business strategies and partnership model accordingly? Okay, so for Taiwanese developers of portable or home use devices, how should they respond to the US DME system? That's the question.
Yeah, again, a very good question. And I think, I hate to give this answer, but I think it depends on it's going to depend on what your home device is. And again, I'm going to come back to, I keep coming back to it. Yeah. Think about this early so that you understand if you're going to develop a home device, hospitals aren't going to be necessarily involved. Physicians aren't going to necessarily be involved other than writing a prescription. It is going to be understanding, how does the DMA system fit? Do I need new codes? Professor Anna talked about this with some of the devices that she talked about in her presentation, is you need to think more about a catch model to start. You're going to be asking patients to pay out of pocket. That doesn't happen with a lot of with a lot of implantable devices. It's just the opposite when it comes to truly new home devices or the durable medical equipment. So again, the price expectations when you're asking a patient to write a check out of pocket is very different than if they think insurance is going to cover it. And understanding what tying it back to your business strategies. What is my pricing strategy going to be? What's my go-to-market strategy? All of those things need to be factored in early. And it'll depend a little bit, is there existing codes? Is the existing payment level if you are an existing code, does that existing code for the durable medical equipment, is that satisfactory in terms of what's your average sales price, your pricing expectations, or is it too low or too high? Too high. No one's going to say that. But in terms of if the pricing is down here and you want up here, then you've got some things that you need to figure out. And for the time being, you might get market clearance. You're probably in the cash pay space for a while. And that all needs to be factored into how it fits for your specific technology and your specific long-term goals for market adoption.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, thank you for Mark that give us some examples. So the next question goes to Professor Chen. Okay, most startups that receive a De Novo approval already obtained clinical trial results and breakthrough designation prior to FDA review. So for Taiwanese company aiming to apply for breakthrough designation, what are the recommended preparation strategy? Since the breakthrough designation requires demonstrating clinical significance and addressing unmet medical needs, how should company integrate clinical study design, data generation, and communication strategy effectively? Yeah.
Okay, this is an easy one because, for a breakthrough, you can Google it and type in breakthrough destinations. They are telling you A, B, C, D. There are certain criteria that you have to fit in, and the evidence you have to provide. And so you can think about it. However, the clinical design and the protocols, be careful with you have to compare with the standard golden standards or the ground truths to provide the evidence of your clinical outcome. So it's important. So you can briefly go through it and you will have some clue about it. And regarding to the in-depth alignments, then we can discuss later. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Okay, the next question is for Mark. Okay, if a SaaS software receive an update version and the FDA modifies its label indication, how would they affect CMS Medicare reimbursement?
So the audience is asking a lot of good questions. Another good question from a reimbursement perspective. It'll depend a little bit on what the indication change is, and if the software as a service or software as a medical device, if it's fundamentally changing. So again, it ties into if you have a code established that describes the software as a service, and your label expands from, if you're doing something and your indications going from here to here, but it doesn't fundamentally change the procedure and what the software is delivering. It just expands the number, your indication expands, so the number of patients that are potentially eligible to receive the software as a device changes. It probably won't change the coding or the payment of the technology. It'll impact coverage potentially, because I'm going to be treating a larger patient population potentially. Again, if the indication fundamentally changes the way the procedure is performed, or the algorithms that are the report that the physician is receiving, that could change where you have to kind of start over and get a new code for that indication. But typically what we see, or at least I've seen with software as a device, is the indication starts here, it starts expanding, but the fundamental, the coding and the payment associated with that software as a service remains the same.
Oh, okay. Okay, so many questions coming to me. Okay, so next question is also for Mark. Okay, from Anhita perspective, what are the key difference between innovative drugs and medical devices in securing national reimbursement?
Yeah, I can only speak to the medical device side, as I don't typically deal a lot with drug reimbursement. Drug reimbursement is handled very differently in this country than devices. Devices are tied into the overall procedure that's being performed, where drugs can be oral, like I'm taking a pill every day. They can be administered, like I'm taking chemotherapy from a drip. Drugs are paid for differently. They're typically covered in the United States by at least Medicare. They're formulary, there's negotiating, those sorts of things. So that's very different. Health technology assessments for medical devices are important, but I struggle a little bit with health technology assessments in this country, because they use the drug model and apply it to medical devices. And drugs typically have large, randomized, multiple controlled studies, because they got a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3 study, where devices don't typically have that. It's easy to randomize on a pill, placebo versus the active ingredient. Devices don't typically have that. So when the question, I want to secure national reimbursement, again, there really isn't a thing in this country as national reimbursement, because we're not a single payer system. So you need to think about your payer mix. Am I mostly Medicare? Am I mostly private insurance? Am I mostly somebody else that I'm trying to I need to factor in Medicare because they're the benchmark. But if I'm primarily a technology for a 40 to 50-year-old patient population, that's not Medicare, that's commercial insurance. So what are they going to need? And a health technology assessment in and of itself, there isn't a version of NICE in the United States. We don't have that. So it really comes down to, what is your clinical publication plan? What are you trying to prove? What is your unmet clinical need? And what are my alternatives? Are you better than your alternatives, or are you equivalent to? And how am I going to demonstrate that over time? Because durability is one of the key questions payers ask. How long does the benefit you tell me you're going to give me? Is it 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, for life? because those things matter.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. I think it is really different. Yeah. Okay. So thank you for your questions and to our speaker for their comprehensive answers, because I need to wrap up here. We hope this session has clarified key aspects of innovative medical device regulation and reimbursement system. There are still tons of questions from the audience I had in my hand, but I think you can reach Mark and Anna through the last page of their slides. Okay, so as we are about to conclude today's seminar, I would like to thank Mr. Mark Domyahn and Professor Anna Chen for their insightful contribution, and all of you for your active participation. Also a special thanks again to Dr. Huang for her presence and support. At last, let's welcome Dr. Huang to deliver the closing remark to this event. Dr. Huang, please.
Okay. Dear every friend, thank you for your kind participation today. I'm deeply touched by today's seminar. For our past experience, many important issues are known, but we are easily overlooked. Okay, we believe today's dialogue has extended our understanding for global regulations and reimbursement, while inspiring new thinking in Taiwan's medtech ecosystem. In closing, we thank both speakers for their generous insights and all participations for your engagement. The Science and Technology Law Institute will continue to explore these critical topics. Please stay in contact with us. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Huang. And we hope today's discussion have provided valuable knowledge and new perspectives for your work in innovative medical devices. And you are welcome to visit the website of Science and Technology Law Institute of Institute for Information Industry, which provides the cutting-edge market information and global trends. And they are also open the gate for you if you need a consultant to develop the global market. So I would like to express our appreciation to Mark and Anna again. Thank you. And yeah, just wave your hands to our audience. Okay, so in the end, please share your feedback about this seminar with us. You can scan the QR code or click the link from the comment section. Then we could prepare to organize our next event soon. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Okay, have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great day, everyone, every speaker. Bye-bye.
Thank you both all. Bye-bye.
Okay, to the end. Okay, thank you, Mark. Wow.
Oh,我笔电也快没电了，no battery。拜拜。